Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Ole Miss LSU Day, Magnolia Bowl. It's going to be kicking off at about 5 o'clock. And I apologize that this is coming a little bit early because a little bit later I will be on the LSU Pregame Show on WWL. And there was kind of a conflict for the time being. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis. I'm going to be joined by John Macon Gillespie of the Grove Report in just a little bit, but we are talking about pregame stuff for the Magnolia Bowl for the Ole Miss LSU game. And first of all, I've said this a couple of times on Twitter and through YouTube Shorts and things like that. It is ridiculous that this football game is being played in September. This game should never be played in September. It is a Halloween timetable game. I know they've done it at the end of the seasons because Alabama and LSU has that like bye week competition going on. That's the game that probably needs to be moved, not this game. But this game should be on Halloween weekend, period. End of story. It should be where about Texas A&M is right now. And if Ole Miss can do that, and if we can get that back, if we can get that at a special level, I guess, we have a chance to be pretty successful because I enjoy this game there. Anyway, just a weird situation. Anyway, we are joined by John Macon Gillespie, and we are going to bring him in just a second. This is going to look a little bit weird, but just bear with us while we do this because I'm having to turn this over in a hurry. So hold on. All right, there we go. John Macon, how are we doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you, Stephen?
Man, I am doing fantastic. We're on the air. We're live. I've been streaming for a little bit because here in about 30 minutes, I've got to hop on WWL. And that's going to take up a little bit of time. And I wanted to do a pregame show as well. First off, what is the news that is coming out today about this game?
News related, I haven't really come across anything injury related, but I mean, I think everybody's kind of interested in a few matchups position wise that we'll see tonight. You know, Jaxson Darton versus the LSU secondary, the Ole Miss offensive line against this LSU front seven. Those are really the storylines I think that's kind of driving the conversation today.
Yeah, what I talked about during the week is that Ole Miss has to earn the right to throw the ball against the secondary. If they can do that through running the football, and I know we've struggled a little bit running the ball, and part of that is just every running play being an inside zone play. Ole Miss has to get a little bit more creative and change the spot in their running game. If they can do that and earn the right to go against the secondary that has transfers from Nicholls State and Southeastern Louisiana, they have a pretty good chance to be successful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's, you have to establish that running game in order to, like you said, how you phrased it, have the right to throw on those defensive backs. Because otherwise, I mean, that just makes the passing game that much more difficult if you don't have a run game to back it up. So that's definitely an apt description, I guess you could say, of what Ole Miss really needs to accomplish today. And that really kind of begins up front, if you think about it, with not just pass protection, but opening some lanes for Quinshon Judkins and Ulysses Bentley.
Yeah, and it's weird that Jaxson Dart is currently the leading rusher on Ole Miss's team, which tells me that when they're creative running the ball, they can actually do it. And the best game that Ole Miss has had running the football this year has come against Georgia Tech. And through that was Jaxson Dart, the quarterback, having a role in the run game. Do you think that Ole Miss might get a little bit creative? I mean, you spent all this money on Spencer Sanders. Is it a chance that you throw in a package to where you do some creative type stuff to take some licks off Jaxson? Because if Jaxson runs the ball, he's ran it 44 times. That means he's on pace to run it about 130 times a year in the year. Most of these conference games, the recipe of Jaxson making it through all that is probably not that good.
Yeah, and I think that does make sense. I don't know that I'll expect to see it necessarily just because of all of the drama, hoopla that surrounded this quarterback competition. I think throwing Spencer in the game optically would look weird for some fans, but I think it would make sense just because, like you said, for Jaxson to hold up, because he is the quarterback of this team, but for him to be able to hold up throughout an entire conference schedule, he can't take hits like he has been, I don't think. And that's something that Ole Miss definitely needs. And right now it looks like Ole Miss needs its quarterback to be able to run, to be able to be an emphasis in the running game because, defenses are keying on Quinshon Judkins, and quite frankly, the offensive line is not really giving him much help in that department.
You mentioned all that, but there's weirdness that is kind of happening in Las Vegas this week. And if you look at the line, Ole Miss is currently a 2.5-point underdog to LSU. LSU is a 2.5-point favorite. The over-under is 67.5. That's a huge over-under. But if you look at the bets, this is the bet of the money going in. Is 79% of the money that's going in is on LSU, but the line's not moving. 78% of the bet is coming in, but the line's not moving. This line should be up around 5 or 6 as an LSU favorite, but they're not right now. Vegas knows something. Those hotels and buildings that are standing out in the desert, they didn't just happen. This line, they're not in the business of losing money in Las Vegas, John.
Yeah, that's accurate. And I've always kind of been a believer as I've gotten older and understood more about the ins and outs of this kind of thing. Reading between the lines a little bit when it comes to Vegas is something I'm a big proponent in, because it seems like more often than not they do know something or have seen something along those lines. And if that line isn't moving, I mean, that's kind of a positive sign, I would think, for Ole Miss.
Yeah, it's them saying, hey, we definitely want the money to come in on LSU. Place your bets on LSU. And they're not in the business of losing money. Also, if you go on FanDuel, this is the parlay of the week, by the way. 42 people have placed this bet on FanDuel.com, America's .1 sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. But Jayden Daniels over 280.5 yards. Jaxson Dart over 262.5 yards. Brian Thomas, the receiver for LSU, over 71.5 receiving. Malik Neighbors over 95.5 receiving. Dayton Wade over 52.5 receiving. This is a $10 wager. Will pay out at about $84. This appears to be the biggest parlay that is going on Ole Miss football right now.
Yeah, and I actually kind of like all of those, especially the quarterback numbers, just kind of looking at them. And Dayton being over 52.5, I like that. I like where that's placed, because I do think that the ball will probably be spread around a little bit more today. With the return of some of these weapons that Jaxson Dart was missing earlier in the season. I think the ball will be spread around a little bit more, but I do think Dayton Wade will still get his touches.
Yeah, and if you look at everything that's going on, people have asked me, it's like, what are you seeing in this game? What do you expect in this game? And I was like, listen, LSU has an elite offense. It's not like 2019 elite, but it's still an elite offense. And LSU has a mediocre to bad defense. Ole Miss has a very good to great offense, maybe not elite, but very good to great whenever they're going and they're clicking. And they have a good to average defense. If you tell me that one group is able to get a stop on the other group, it is Ole Miss defense being able to stop the LSU offense. I think Ole Miss is going to win this game because of that.
Yeah, and I was actually one of the few people on our staff that leaned Ole Miss with this. My brain kept telling me that LSU made sense to pick here just because of some mismatches, especially front seven offensive line. But the more I think about it, the more I thought intangibly about this game a little bit. I don't see Lane Kiffin dropping back-to-back games in this fashion. A disappointing loss at Alabama last week. I don't see him having that again this week. If he does, then that's really going to spark some negative emotions, I think, amongst the fans. But I looked at that, and it's at home, and I feel like Ole Miss feels like, whether it's accurate or not, it feels like it's backed into a corner right now. In regards to its chances to Atlanta, which I guess is accurate, but I think Ole Miss comes out swinging today, and I think this team looks different than it did a week ago, and maybe that's just me reading too much into it, but the intangible aspect of this game, the emotions, being backed into a corner, it being in Oxford, I think all played in the Rebels' favor.
All right, John, you got to answer this question because it's popped up in the chat. Why are you wearing a Sparty hat?
So it's actually a funny story. So in my hometown, I went to, and it's a tiny, tiny town here in North Mississippi. I went to Dollar General today. I was, just picking up some random stuff. And I walked by their clothing section, a Michigan State hat for $12 in North Mississippi. I was like, I've got to have it. I collect hats. I was like, I've got to have this. That I don't love Michigan State or anything like that, but I was like, all right, yeah, that's a good addition to the collection.
Yeah, interesting situation indeed. Now, in this football game, I think I am expecting Suntarian Perkins to play a big role in this game. And I think with Jayden Daniels scrambling, with Malik Neighbors being essentially an NFL-level wide receiver, I think getting pressure on Jayden Daniels will be important, but also not allowing Jayden to scramble to this dominant throwing side. I think we're going to see a lot of Suntarian Perkins, despite what Lane Kiffin said earlier in the week.
Yeah, I think it would be almost foolish to not see him a lot, because he had a good game last week. From my untrained eyes, at least. So I think it would be foolish to not utilize that weapon to try to contain Jayden as much as possible, because as Ole Miss fans saw last year, when he gets outside of the pocket and he scrambles and he moves, that's where the poison really happens, it seems like. And containing him is going to be a big aspect of this game for the defense.
Yeah, and it's just a situation to where, LSU can get hot. I just saw like a pick six highlight in the Arkansas game and just completely blew my mind. But LSU, whenever they get hot, Jayden Daniels is almost a perfect complement for LSU football, because to me, in their history, LSU has always been a momentum team. To where when things go good, they go really good for LSU. The trick is to, once you get on them, not let them back up, because if you let them back up, it can get hairy. And Jayden Daniels is just the quarterback version of that to suit it to a T. You cannot let this kid get into a rhythm. You cannot let this kid get going, because if that happens, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and it may have been you. I can't remember who phrased it this way this week, but they referred to him as streaky. And I think that's a very good description of him, because kind of like you said, when he gets going, it kind of follows the team. When he gets going, he is going. It is there. If you can contain him, things immediately look up in your favor.
Yeah. And all this week, the question has been people have talked about the offensive line and how that is a weakness for the Ole Miss team and all of that. And I honestly think that is going to get masked more than people think it is. I think a lot of that is slow developing plays that kind of bit Ole Miss, maybe cockiness that just kind of put them under a little bit more pressure. I think you're going to see a little bit more quick stuff. They're going to do a little bit more stuff that Bill Flowers has called for in the past week. You're going to see them move the spot in the run game. You're going to see them use the quarterback run game. You are going to see them look not necessarily different offensively, but I think you're going to see this Ole Miss football team look more in rhythm than we have seen them in, heck, a year at this point.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the most shocking thing about the offense to this point, is that lack of rhythm to me. And a lot of that, I think, does come back to the run game, or the inability to really sustain a running game to this point. But I mean, that's kind of the key. If Ole Miss can establish that rhythm, have a run game, and have some of those more quick-paced things that help the offensive line in this case, I think that's the way to go.
What do you think about the uniform combination with the end zones? This could be a pretty good looking game, man.
I agree. Yeah. Obviously, you and I both wanted Navy, red, gray this week, and we both called for that. But I don't. I'll come out and say I don't think Ole Miss has a bad looking uniform combination. No. I think I would have preferred to have seen the Navy, red, gray, but the powder white paired with the red end zones, that's a pretty clean look. And obviously LSU's normal threads. That's a pretty good matchup, I think. The contrast of that, the history, I guess, behind all those colors on the field at the same time, it should be pretty good. And the time of day, oddly enough, I think will help with that. When the sun's getting low, I think the field will look really good. And then as it transitions into nighttime, so.
We haven't seen the navy, red, gray, and the normal LSU strip since 2014.
Yep.
That's the last time. It's been 10 years since we saw what I think is football, just the look of football. It's been 10 years since we've seen that.
Yep, that was
Mississippi State has thrown the touchdown pass against Alabama.
Did they really?
Yeah, no, it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
Dak Prescott was the last one to do it.
Yeah, and that was the game in Baton Rouge where LSU stormed the field after the game, correct? 14.
Well, no, 14. Yeah, they did storm it against us, but
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the last time Ole Miss wore that, because after that, the next year, LSU wore the all white. Mm-hmm. We were in the right strip. They wore all right. In 2016, we wore the powder helmets down in Death Valley, and then it became the powder and the numbers under Mount Luke. And then when Lane Kiffin got there, it's been predominantly the powder jerseys and the powder helmets, with the exception of last year with the white lids.
Yeah, and I thought last year, I mean, again, I think that uniform combination is fine that they wore against LSU last year, but to me, that looked odd. Ole Miss LSU game with white helmets on the field just kind of felt weird.
Yeah. If we got right here, somebody's James McDonald says this is the game that after halftime, Bobby Boucher comes and saves the day. I'm assuming we're the Bourbon Bowl. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, good. All right. Let's see. Larry Fletcher says, me too, Cameron. We are loaded with potential, just haven't tapped it. The offense has a chance to be good to very, very good to elite, but not the way they've used it the first third of the season.
Yep.
The talent is on the field for Ole Miss. Everything is good to go, and I'm absolutely not giving up an inch on this team. There's just some tweaks that we want to see made, and if that gets made, I think they'll be all right as well. So, John, before we get out of here today and I get on with pregame and everybody watches Texas A&M beat Arkansas and Kentucky just absolutely curb stomp Florida. Good grief. What's some final thoughts?
This game, I think, can go either way. I think the FPI, the line, they both indicate that. I think this is really a coin flip. Whoever can take advantage and cover up the mismatches on their own side is going to win the game. I have Ole Miss winning. You can go see that at thegrovereport.com. But if Ole Miss can take care of the front of its offensive line against LSU's front seven, I think Ole Miss can win the game. If LSU can get to the quarterback and mask some of those issues in the secondary, I think LSU wins the game. So that's I know that's very hard-hitting analysis, but those are the matchups I see being the most influential in this one.
Yeah, I think this matchup right here with Ole Miss giving up a red zone TD 42% of the time, that's actually a fairly good number. They've been pretty good in the red zone this year. And we talked about how this defense was probably going to be all right, but they were just going to be good in certain areas. This appears to be that area. But when you look at Jayden Daniels, this is something that's interesting to me. He's completing nearly 75% of his passes for nearly 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But if you look to what he's doing with Malik Neighbors is nearly half of that yardage.
Yeah.
Ole Miss needs to figure out how to break up that connection. Make the other wide receivers beat you. Now, there's some talented dudes on that side over there. It's not just Malik Neighbors, but you would rather take your chance with them than with Neighbors, because if you're not careful, it'll look a whole lot like it did against Mississippi State.
Yep, I agree. And he had a field day against Mississippi State. I mean, it seemed like every other pass was his way, and he was just making defenders look foolish, essentially. Ole Miss needs to not do that, and they have a good shot.
Yeah, and people are going to freak out and say you shouldn't man up that. I think Ole Miss at the cornerback position, they're okay. What you want to avoid is the one-on-one matchup at the safety position with Malik Neighbors. If he lines up in the middle of the field, you got to figure out a way to handle that. I trust Amari Walden. I trust DeAndre Prince. I trust Deshaun Gaddy on Malik Neighbors one-on-one. I'm not sure I trust Isheem Young on him. So I'm not sure that I trust Washington on him. So we'll see exactly what it looks like. The safety position, as I told everybody before the season, that's something that we needed to look at, but we'll see exactly how it goes. Offensively, do you have faith in Jaxson Dart to turn it around?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, I think so much of the offense has ridden on his shoulders lately, and I don't think that's how the offense is designed to operate. It's been him, right, to this point. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think he's more than talented enough to do that, but he needs some help, having some weapons back. And if he can get a big game out of Judkins too, that's going to be immense for him to take advantage of the secondary.
Yeah, Deshaun Anthony should have Neighbors' number. That's probably the guy they're going to match up on the slot. Now, Anthony is a player that, while he is a good football player, he can cover quite well. But the reason he is not a corner and is playing safety is because his man-to-man coverage skills is not quite elite. It might be really good for the safety position. At the corner position is problematic. So what I'm saying is, while Anthony is probably the best option to one-on-one Neighbors, I don't think Ole Miss wants to match them up one-on-one, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, I follow that.
So, John, you're about to head to the press box and get to see what is going to be a fun Ole Miss versus LSU game. This game is always fun. We're going to close with this. This is a game that I think, after teams come into the league, and whenever Texas and Oklahoma comes in next year and it's 16 teams, Ole Miss and LSU needs to be back on Halloween. Figure it out. Do what you need to do. That game needs to be on Halloween. Move the Alabama LSU, if they're playing, to the middle of October and set that bye week up in the middle of October. Ole Miss and LSU needs to be on Halloween.
I agree. That is to be our campaign pitch, I guess, for the next calendar year.
Yeah. They finally got Alabama and Tennessee back to the third Saturday in October. They need to get Ole Miss and LSU back to Halloween. Also, after the game, right after the game, about 30, 45 minutes, we'll be doing a post-game show, and I'm going to be doing an extra short on the channel as well if any news breaks between now and the beginning of the game. So you've got that short, you got the halftime short, you've got the end of the game short, and then you got the post-game show live. John, I hope you have a good time in the press box and all that. And, man, enjoy this. It's just such a fun game, man.
I agree. I appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you.
All right. Take care, bud.